let's talk about what can oftentimes feel like thankless careers, but enriching at the end of the day, just like volunteering can be.
Safety is about compliance or policies or procedures or even process. It's about human beings understanding the implications of what they do.
Welcome to the Canary Report, the podcast where risk leaders, safety professionals, and operational executives come for real-world stories and smarter strategies to keep people safe. I'm your host, Michael Zell. In each episode, I sit down with exceptional leaders who are transforming how risk and safety are managed. Whether you're a leader of a nationwide EH&S program in a high-risk industry, or you champion workplace safety across 200 retail locations, this podcast is for you. Let's get into it.
Welcome to the Canary Report, where risk leaders, safety professionals, and operational executives come for real-world stories on how to be smarter and keep people safe. I am your host, Michael Zell, founder and CEO of Yellowbird. Today, joining me is Chris Seider. He is the Director of Health and Safety for Foth Company. His background is amazing. I'm excited to have him join us. He's currently a leader of over 700 engineers, or part of a leadership team of 700 engineers, 28 locations, countless projects nationwide. He maintains an exceptional recordable incident rate of below 1% and over 14 million hours worked without lost time, which is such an impressive statistic. He's mastered the art of building sustainable people-certified safety cultures. And what that means in his world is he's been able to develop a mindset of safety and ownership within the people themselves. He took a 100-year boat builder from a staggering 35% TIR down to single digits in just 4 years. From a background perspective, I am delighted to also say that he is a very, very good human being. He has been involved in so many things, and I am just delighted that Chris is with us. So thank you, Chris, for joining us.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Michael. Great to be here.
So I want to kick off because this is a human-to-human podcast. I don't believe that safety is about compliance or policies or procedures or even process. It's about human beings understanding the implications of what they do. So I always like to kick off with who you are as a human, Chris. And can you tell me about your family and your background and your journey a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am probably a Midwesterner. I've spent my whole life in Wisconsin. I am a proud father of 2 children. So I have a son in 4th grade and a daughter in kindergarten, which keeps me running around quite actively. So while I'm not watching over my 700 adult children from a safety perspective, I have my 2 at home that keep me running around as well. And in addition to that, have been actively engaged in scouting for the last 3 years, scout leader, and helping to work with the local community on building up a platform for other children in the area as well. So
fantastic. Now, are they both boys and girls? What are the genders of your kids?
So oldest is our son Miles, and our youngest is our daughter Autumn. So we have one of each, and in addition, we have lots of rescue animals that make up our life. So we have a off-the-track thoroughbred that we've rescued that my wife rides and trains with. We have 2 cats that have come off the street and joined our household, and 1 stray dog from Tennessee is part of our home as well. So,
it's fantastic. Well, it sounds like you have a really active household, and I bet your kids love growing up with the animals. It's a special thing. My kids grew up in more of a city environment, and they do love animals. But I find that people who grew up in more farm or rural areas really have a special upbringing. So along those lines, on the scouting side of things, so you're just getting into this with your son, I imagine. Did you do that growing up? Were you a scout?
I was a scout, so I can't take credit for being a Eagle Scout. I didn't make it that far, but scouting was certainly a part of my life growing up, and have the fond memories of the rain gutter regattas, which were the boat races, and in the Pinewood Derbies, and all those activities with my father, the camp, the outings, you name it, and was really happy to be part of it in our community. I actually took over our pack just post-COVID, and COVID had really decimated scouting because that was heavily a in-person type activity, and you strip away the ability to be in person together, they lost like 80% of their population. So proudly was able to help build that group back up and get it back up to about 40 scouts and help to recover that as well.
Wonderful. It's such an important part of the journey for those who take it. And I was a Cub Scout. My sister was a Brownie back in the day. I don't even know if they still call them that, before the Girl Scouts. I did not go through my Eagle Scout or anything like that, although I've got friends and cousins who have. And it's a wonderful program. So thank you for doing that for the community. That's a gift, because it's not easy. Like most volunteering, it takes heart and it takes commitment to serve, because it's a thankless job at times. So
Absolutely. Well, much like
I'm sure
safety
that
can be at times, as we said on a podless or a podcast about safety. Of course, let's talk
yes,
about what can
yes,
oftentimes feel like thankless careers, but enriching at the end of
absolutely.
the day, just like volunteering can be. So.
You are the greatest guest I think I've ever had. That was a perfect segue to your life in safety and your journey to get there. I would love to hear about your business journey and your career. Did you start out as a safety professional, or did you, like many, many people, kind of go into it sideways and realize it was a calling?
I love this question, Michael. And I every time I meet a new safety professional, I always like to lead in and say, share with me your superhero origins story. Because I really believe that it's similar to that. Most of us, especially if you're part of my generation, there wasn't schooling for safety when I was coming up through the ranks. Though now we have programs where people can actually say, "I want to be a safety professional," and go for a degreed program. That wasn't my entry point into the profession. I actually went to school for business, have my bachelor's of business administration, and ultimately fell into safety. So I was working for the shipbuilder that you had referred to earlier, and was hired as a recruiter. And ultimately, about 6 months into into my existence with that company, they had let go of their current safety professional and had given me the opportunity to say, would you like to lead the safety committee? And I said, of course, I'll take the safety committee. And then that led to incident investigations and work comp, and all that led to building programs. And about a year into that stint, they said, you can't do both anymore, pick one. And I had already fallen in love with safety. I knew that this was something special. It was truly an enriching professional that you could look at what you were doing in a positive light for the people you worked around and with. And I continue to go down that journey. So I've been doing safety professionally now for just shy, if not right at 20 years now.
Good for you. And so that 100-year-old shipbuilder, where were you geographically? Were you still in Wisconsin?
Still in Wisconsin, so on the lake shore, of course, of Lake Michigan. So this company was building what you would call custom mega yachts. So if you ever see the Travel Channel with the $40 million toys that people were driving around, that's what this company had built. And as you mentioned, they've been doing this for over 130 years. And here I was, the young safety professional with all sorts of energy and zeal, who was going to come in and change their world. Meaning, as you'd mentioned, our incident rate for that company when I took it over was over 35%. In fact, it was over 37%. And that wasn't a good thing, obviously. And we had the challenge to convince this workforce that what they were doing, which also equated to what their fathers had done and their grandfathers had done for over 100 years, wasn't right, and wasn't the way things should be done. And that was a major cultural shift that had to occur within that company.
Well, it's interesting. I think about the complexities when I have these conversations. I think about the complexities of the jobs that people are doing. And, at Yellowbird, we always talk about the nuances and the expertise of the professional and how important it is that you match not just a certification or an understanding of regulations, but understanding of the industry, because of that, of how important it is to be able to relate when you're doing jobs of any sort. And in shipbuilding, particularly mega yachts and things like that, they're going to be quite large. You're going to be you're going to have everything from fall from heights issues because you're way up there. Those are very large vessels, and you have so many complexities that in other equally dangerous but different environments they don't have to deal with. I bet that was a challenging situation. Was fall from heights and one of those things that you were focused on?
The complexity, right? You talk about that, and to put it in perspective, we were covered by 3 different standards of OSHA, all within one shipyard. So you have your shop environment that would be considered your standard general industry 1910 environment. Then you have these ships that are considered to be basically, in true definition, a construction site that's taking place within this general industry environment. And then as soon as they touch the water, you move right into the maritime 1915 standards. So simple things of fall protection. You talk about heights. You literally have numerous rules that are floating around that you have to try and convince the workforce what makes sense. What's the right rule? Is it 4 feet? Is it 5 feet? Is it 6 feet? Whatever the case may be. And to add complexity to that, you have an environment that the product was built around custom, meaning none of these boats were ever the same, which meant that every single project you're working on had to be re-engineered and rebuilt in a new way. So standardization of tools and processes and all those things were extra complicated in the environment as well.
Interesting. And yet you were able to find the through lines on each of these things to reduce the incident rate, which is fantastic. So what were some of the things, and we'll get to your current life shortly, but what were some of the things that you gravitated towards and made an impact when you were in that role?
Yeah, well, I guess number one is the style in which you approach a workplace like that, I think is really important. When you come into an environment, especially when many of us were starting new with a fresh organization, we have history, we know what works, we know what doesn't work at times. Oftentimes you come in hot and you want to just start changing radically everything on day one. I think the first part is understanding that change is difficult, and that the way you approach change and the way you navigate change by engaging the workforce as opposed to pushing upon workforce, I think is certainly important. But for me, and this will be a theme that I carry throughout all organizations that I've worked with, is finding that niche within the culture that makes sense. And what I mean by that is, we all talk about safety cultures and does your company have a safety culture, or we promote our own safety cultures. But I think that culture is a very complicated and complex topic. And I also believe that this thought process of having a standalone safety culture doesn't work typically. I think that truly that safety shouldn't be a standalone thing. Safety should just be something that inherently happens across all elements of the culture. But strategically, what I always look for is what is the strongest part of the culture that's not safety, and how can we tie safety to that culture? And what I mean by that is, thinking about the shipbuilders and those career professionals that I was working with. One of the strongest elements of their culture was their pride in their skill, their pride in their craft, their pride in their trade. So what I looked to do within that culture was link and marry safety and being safe and delivering safely and not getting hurt as part of the process as an adder to that pride into that craftsmanship. Meaning the boat can be beautiful, but if you're not, as a result of the process, something's wrong here. And when we're able to marry the two together and they realize that to be skilled in my craft, I also need to be safe, they own safety the same way they owned the skill and craftsmanship over 130 plus years. And that accelerated the integration of safety within the culture. It is really, truly attaching it to the strongest element of the culture that already was in place, as opposed to trying to build a standalone safety culture on top of it.
I imagine, just from what you've said, with the generations of employees and this long legacy, that the way it's always been done was probably your biggest hurdle of grandfather, father, myself, maybe, or themselves, and then maybe even their next generation that's coming along has done it a certain way. And yet there are better tools, there are better ways, there are safer ways. Was there any pivotal moment that you recall? And then I want to move on with your journey to hear about your next stages of the journey. But were there any part of that dialogue, of that piece that you found was a learning moment or a aha moment that you can share?
There's so many, right? And I think that 3.5 year journey that I had with that company, it feels like a blur, and it truly is when you're in the midst of battle and growth like that. I think what stands out to me is some of those micro moments, and what I mean by that is I think about some of the people who probably were fighting us so hard and were so against the thought process that anything could possibly be wrong with what they're doing, and that that there's anything more that could possibly be done in the area of safety. There were those micro moments of converting those folks, and shifting those conversations from having somebody who was so adamantly opposed to what you were trying to do. All of a sudden you almost could see the light bulb switch, and you realize that we've got them, they get it. And now the power that they brought to the rest of the organization by driving through, they're no longer a non-believer. They're taking it to others, and they're carrying it forward. Those were accelerating moments, I think. And there's a lot of those little accelerating moments where you saw, wow, this culture is more than just coming from me or from leadership. This culture now is spreading, and now these people are carrying it further and further. And I think that highlights to me is what I always say to others is my favorite things that happen within any organization that I work for related to safety are typically those things that I didn't even know were happening.
Yes.
Yeah, and what
Yes.
I mean by that is I don't
Yeah.
want to touch everything. I don't want to be involved with
Right.
everything. But if I built a culture and I built an environment
Yes.
that people are now doing things that are in all by definition safety related tasks that I didn't even know they
Yeah.
started in the first place, and all of a sudden they take action. That to me is that maturity level to where all of a sudden you know you've made it. And in each organization you hit that
Such a
point and you say, wow,
yeah.
things are happening now, and I didn't even have to ignite those fires, and they're just starting to burn on their own.
I think that is such a insightful statement you made there. It's funny. I'm kind of, I don't know if you'd call it a serial entrepreneur. This is my fourth company, but each one, I've been doing this a long time. I've got more years on you. So I've been doing it much more than 25. But that being said, when you're an entrepreneur, you start by doing everything. It's just the way it works. You literally hang a shingle, and you're an accountant, and you're a salesman, and you're trying to figure out if you're going to be able to figure it out. And the moment that you realize that somebody else is selling, and they've taken the things, and they've processized them, and deals are coming in that you don't know about, or accounting processes are happening, and you're getting the report you need without having to ask for it. Those are those moments that it's in safety and in all of life. As a parent, see your kid get up and clear their plate and put it in the dishwasher or in the sink or wherever your requirement or your need is, without having to tell them. And it's just those little moments of success that you just say, all right, we're making an impact. We're doing something.
And it's self-promoting as well, right? That means the more things that are happening that shifts what we do as safety professionals. And if I fast forward to where I went after the Shipbuilder, so the economy of 2008, I because I think this is a great transition to it. The economy of 2008 beat up the all of us, and specifically a market that was based on selling $30 million toys to the richest of the rich in a new a macro environment that said it's harmful to be a rich person, right? This is the banking crisis and all those things were occurring. I had to make a difficult decision to leave that company and went then to a startup company. So totally different culture. So rather than 130 plus years of culture, this company had about 5 or 6 years of culture. Similar to the Shipbuilder, this company had about a 35% incident rate, total recordable incident rate. So again, this was a whole different aspect of trying to figure out where do you go with culture? How do you build it? Being a company that was new and fresh, we had to literally build the entire corporate culture from scratch. Basically, what we did was, I don't want to say threw away what was there for the last 5 years, but we're really in a stage of building a fresh corporate culture. Now, leading to the conversation we just came out of, one of the struggles that I had within that company was they had a very high turnover rate. A
Yes.
retention rate was, in the
Yes.
40% range type of thing, because it was a tax funded type of environment. They were building wind turbine things to support
Yes.
wind energy. So when tax credits were high, business was great. When tax credits were
Hmm.
low, business wasn't great. So our population was all over the map.
Yes.
It
Yes.
was really difficult to build a corporate culture with a turnstile type door environment. You didn't have that
Yes.
longevity of employees. You didn't have that ability to create common behaviors and actions and all these things. Now, what I'll say
Sure.
is through pure blunt force, we were able to drop the incident rate down to less than 3% over about a 4 year period of time. So, all things said, on paper, it was a success. But to where we just left the conversation, when I left that organization, the rates started to climb right back up again. And there was not a true corporate culture that was there for the long haul to continue that. So I write that second experience of mine off as internally a failure, meaning as a new professional, I just started doing everything. I'm going to grab everything, I'm going to build everything, I'm going to drive everything. Did I deliver success for 4 years? Yes, on paper we did, but for the long term, that culture wasn't there. And that was a big lesson for me. I took that as a bruise. And this is something I talk to new professionals all the time about is be thoughtful about where you spend your energy, because if you're just spending it, you're not building a legacy, you're just delivering actions. And when you leave, nothing's going to be there anymore. So that was a hard experience for me to kind of go through and to see it all start to crack and crumble and realize I didn't do this company any favors, though I did while I was there. I didn't do them any favors when I left.
I commend you so much for being honest about that. Not a lot of people would acknowledge that, and I think that's a really important piece of being a great leader is understanding the the legacy that you are leaving behind at any organization, whether you're a leader at the top or you're a leader within an organization. Everybody has the opportunity to be a leader, and are you creating processes and systems? It's interesting because you're talking about '08. I think everybody had pivotal moments at that point in their lives when they were at that age in '08. The concept of Yellowbird actually became a thing in '08 for me because my father got retired. He was in his late 60s or mid 60s, but he wasn't quite ready to retire. Maybe it was his low 60s now that I think about it from a math perspective. But he got retired. It was part of banking, and he was in that world, and it was, so he wanted to become a consultant. And he tried very hard, but reality is when you're a corporate executive and you know some people, but you're not a salesman, and you don't have to necessarily hustle and go to all these things that you need to do and do the insurance and do all this stuff. It ended up not working for him, and he didn't have to do it. But I watched that and said, what a waste of talent. And part of the thesis of Yellowbird was, how can I help people that are transitioning or going from a full-time working environment to have them take their wisdom and talent and bring it to the edge. But part of that, in what you and I are just talking about, is the companies and the leaders within the companies. And this is true to this day. Now, we've gotten better at helping guide those leaders and create things. You need to create a duplicatable process, an expectation. What does great look like?
Mhm.
We can't do that for you. There's no third party that can do that for you. You have
Yep.
to do that internally. But you can create surveys and assessments. You can create trainings. You can create things that other people can execute. And that stuff you can leave behind, because if you're doing it all yourself, when you go, it goes. And so
Exactly.
it's such
Yep.
a it's such an interesting discussion. And thank you again for being so honest about that.
Yeah.
So when
Well,
you left
and
that
I think that, again, you think about all of us when we're early career professionals, it's hard to say no to any opportunities that have been provided. You're like, hey, take over the fire extinguisher inspections, or hey, take over the AEDs, or hey, do this, do that, do that. Of course, it's safety. You're the safety person. Why don't you do all these things? And I think it's more difficult to have that confidence to say, is this the right place for me to spend my energy and my talent, taking everybody else's responsibility for safety away from them? Because again, what happens through that, by experience, is number one, when you take responsibilities away from somebody else, it's really hard to give it back someday. So you're going
yes,
to
it
be
is.
careful of what you
It's very
absorb because it's hard to give it away. But number
yes,
two, it lowers your capacity and lowers the breadth of reach of safety across the organization. And I
yes,
go back to, I'm the coach, I'm the mentor, I'm the resource to help other people deliver safety in what they do every single day, not take
right,
all the things that are safety related off their plate and do it for them. They lose
yes,
ownership, they lose
yes.
pride, they lose any sort of meaning and responsibility around safety. And again, that just it snowballs it at the end of the day.
Not to mention, I think the young, eager version of all of us feel that if they don't own it, as in do it, which is different than owning it, they are at risk of having somebody think that they're not, I don't know, a leader, or they're not, truly owning it because they didn't do it themselves. And the reality is that the objective of owning something is making sure it's getting done effectively and impactfully, and not living on airplanes all the time, and not running between trainings and fire extinguisher assessments and all of these things. Like, you can execute those with other people and still own it. you know it's funny. There's a mental thing. I think it just takes time to realize that you're not at risk of your job if you're not actually doing a training yourself.
And having the vulnerability and humility to say, somebody else may be able to do this better than me.
Of course.
That thought process that just because it's got a safety spin that I'm the most technically suited expert to deliver all of it, none of us could live to that capacity. And acknowledging that somebody else is better positioned to do this more efficiently, smarter, you name it, than I can do it. Let's help set those people up for success rather than floundering and trying to do it ourselves. And yeah,
It's such a great,
that's a tough. And those are probably some of my biggest learnings coming out of that last environment. Is again, I think of my time spent with that organization, all sorts of the kudos and industry recognition, the
oh yeah,
National Safety Council's 40 under 40s and this and
oh
that, and
yeah.
it's like, and on paper it truly is, and but maybe I just needed more time, but truly I think it really came down to approach of how I pursued it. And those are the lessons that I carry
Yeah.
into what we deliver today within my current organization of Foth. Is a totally flipped on its head scripted approach of we are not going to do it all. This is going to be owned by everybody across the organization, not in
Yes,
some cultural statement, but in truly, this is your job description. And you agree
yes.
that you're best positioned to own this and drive this. And it changes what my job duties look like at the end of the day. And I'd say
You
for the
know,
better. And I think for more long-term sustainable cultural results, I think that we found the secret sauce to really make this work.
it's such an interesting statement that you made a few moments ago regarding whether or not you're the best person to be doing a given task. And the thing that I'm so proud of that we're developing right now is, thank goodness for AI and some of the things with large language modeling that I am not smart enough to have known any of this was coming. It happened to be the right place at the right time with enough momentum. But I I always say, if you look at somebody's resume, yourself included, and you look at both companies, nobody would look at your resume and say, I understand what that company does. I understand what their risks were. I understand who they are as an organization, because it's not a very specific name. And if you go down a resume of most people, they were the safety manager, safety director, safety coordinator, whatever it happened to have been. But at a logistics company is much different than at a welding organization or an electrical company, and their expertise is very different. And so, one of the things that I love about our technology, or technology in general, take Yellowbird out of it, is that you can actually find people's superpowers and give them something they will love to do. Because we can do almost anything. But what do we love to do and what are we great at? That's the difference, right? So in that transition, so now you're at Foth, and tell us about case in point. Tell us about Foth. I don't think a lot of people know the company by name. At
There you
least
go.
I
Well,
didn't.
we're the world's best kept secret, right? But we're working hard to break that. I think, like most firms are. But so a
Sure.
little bit about Foth. We are predominantly an engineering, professional services, project management, construction management organization. We are in fact the largest engineering firm headquartered out of the state of Wisconsin. We're definitely not the largest nationwide, but we're the largest headquartered out of Wisconsin. And we do just about everything, it feels, at the end of the day. So we're predominantly broken down into what I would call three major delivery areas, operating units. One is what we would call our production solutions, which is heavy manufacturing based. So a lot of your electrical controls, process, packaging, engineering, supporting a lot of our private industry type clients, publicly traded as well, on really helping them to standardize or to streamline their organizations, in packaging materials, you name it, type of stuff. So on the other side of the house, we have an environment solutions group that is heavy on environmental remediation, permitting, compliance, a lot of activities on that front, safety as we've looked to engage Yellowbird on and talk to. So we do a lot with similar type clients to production solutions, but more focused on that environmental and regulatory type environment. Do a lot in ports and harbors and other environments. And then finally, we have a group, infrastructure solutions, that's heavily focused on the civil realm. So working with DOTs and airports, really on civil related projects. So feels like on any given day, I've got people just about everywhere doing just about anything. And to the point that you raised, the people's misunderstanding, I feel like I'm always having to justify to my peers from a safety perspective what we've achieved at Foth. So you talk about the 14 million hours plus without a lost time. We've got 10 years below industry average, consistently under 1.0. I have a lot of people come back and say, well, of course, you're just a bunch of engineers. You don't do anything all day long. And that couldn't be further from the truth. I mean, our people are out there in so many environments, from mines to on boats to in manufacturing environments, construction sites, you name it. And I'll say, and I know I'm biased, I think our environment is even more challenging because we don't have control over most of those environments. We're in somebody else's house. So we have to be that much more savvy to identifying hazards that we maybe have never seen before, and have a culture that's so strong to knowingly take steps to avoid and mitigate those hazards before we take actions for our work. I think that adds extra complexities, as opposed to when I had a manufacturing space. If I found a cord across a walkway, I could engineer that cord across the walkway out, and that hazard is gone. My people find that cord across the walkway, they can't do anything about the hazard. Now they have to take steps and actions and behaviors as to how they're going to work around that hazard and risk every single day. So it's complicated, but we all, and I won't say this to try and be a martyr, all of our environments are unique and complex and have their own challenges. And I think that's part of the journey is exploring different industries and environments, and being flexible to those unique challenges that you're going to encounter.
Yeah, I would say that if I had to ask myself a through line, I mean, I've had probably 50 or 100 of these conversations now, and the through line of all of the true leaders and great, minds that I've been fortunate enough to interview is the passion for complexity and change. And I think you have to be that kind of a person to be in this industry, because there is a different complexity in every scenario, no matter what it is. If you're doing forklift driving and forklift management at a warehouse. It's much different than a forklift that's on a construction site. And it's much different than a forklift that's in an agriculture environment. And yes, it's forklift, but no, that's a very different, that there's different risks, there's different things. And I'm just taking one specific, little tiny nuanced thing. We've got thousands of examples of that. I often say that the number one thing I used to hear from investors, like venture capital and so forth, because we are a venture capital based or backed organization, and they go, "Oh, well, it's a pretty small niche. I'm not sure that there's enough work there." Do a little bit of research on the complexities of risk, and they come back to like, "Whoa, okay, yeah, this is a really, really big problem." I'm like, "Yeah, we're trying to solve a very, very big problem." And so it's interesting because I don't think people realize how complex our worlds are. So you've been there roughly 10 years, just over 10 years, correct?
Yeah, actually hit over 13 years this year now, so the time continues to fly. Yes.
Wonderful, wonderful. So what are the current initiatives that you're focusing on within your organization or external to your organization that you're excited about right now?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. So let's tack on to the what everybody's talking about, right? And that's the whole AI boom, and where does AI serve safety, and how can we use AI? I think that probably the biggest thing in front of us right now is, and again, as a 20-year safety professional, is not getting to the stage where I'm not ready to adopt new technology. So part of my, challenges is saying there's probably something here. How can we explore it? Where do we go with this? What does this look like? So right now, I think probably the biggest thing that our team is looking at is what are those tasks that we deliver that could be streamlined through AI? So I'll use, for example, probably the biggest thing that's got me excited right now is safety planning. I talk about our environment. Our success is heavily driven by our ability to build solid project-specific safety plans that get to the unique and tailored risks of every single project that we're going to work on, and present that information to our team members who are going to be exposed to those hazards. I've always said that the value out of that process is not the development of the plan. It's the handoff of the plan to the team members and in their understanding of the plan, and most critically, the actions that they're going to take because of that plan that are going to keep them safe. But we
Right.
spend hours building the plan, and oftentimes, again, admittedly, sometimes we end up with a plan that's beautifully drafted and it goes and sits on a shelf. What we're looking at right now is how can we use AI to streamline the process of building the plan so that we can shift the energy away from development of this big administrative tool and shift it over to education of our team members in actual practical use of the plan. And again, better spending our efforts. So I'm excited because I think that AI and a lot of the technologies that are in front of us right now are going to give us the ability to totally flip that process on its head. And again, shift the approach and the intent of that. And probably, just from what I've seen to date, come out with a better product than the human would have developed from a safety plan, and let the human focus on the better aspect, which is that presentation of the plan and the usage of the plan at the end of the day. So that's probably the hottest off the presses that we're investing in right now is what does this look like? And the funny thing is I've had this on my roadmap for 4 years now, and it's just now come to reality now that some of the AI tools are starting to hit and give us practical use cases.
So what we're doing and working with folks like yourself and others is, as they're giving us the guidelines that they would like the Yober professionals to follow, the why is a big part of that, and kind of using that as the instructions for the professional that when you go out here, here are your themes. Here's why you're doing this. Here's what the company's philosophy is. Make sure you reinforce this. All those things can be done with AI now that couldn't be done before. But what I also find a little bit scary, and that we all as professionals need to be careful about, is much like everything else in life, you learn, you cut your teeth by developing the plan. You actually have to think about it with an analytical eye. And what I have found, even internally here, when we're doing sales presentations or proposals, and you can tell somebody ran that through GPT, and I'm like, nope, that is not us. That is not. And if you read that, you can tell that you didn't write this. And I said, it's very, very important that if you're going to be communicating this with the customer, that you truly understand their need. Because if you don't understand their need and you are communicating the proposal that GPT wrote, that's not okay. And so now what I've started doing myself is taking my personal reports and presentations, and I'm putting them into our systems and saying, follow this structure. And then I'm making sure that we have at least a baseline of understanding of what's proper. Like we said, you start by doing these things yourself, and then you have somebody else do them. Well, now if people are having something else do them, it's like, well, hold on, let's pull it back a little bit. Let's not outsource it completely.
Well, and you'll hear, and we talk it all the time as kind of a constant reminder and a common thread is you hear the concept of human in the loop, and it's really about for me, it's about putting the human in the right part of the loop. So again, back to that conversation about safety planning and how do you utilize this? Now I can shift it to say the human in the loop's best spent energy is on hazard assessment. So I can put them through a process of get in a room together, talk about your project, talk about the risks, talk about the hazards, identify all the hazards. Then I can let the system generate the plan using our inputs, our drafted plans, you name it, take out that piece that really was the administrative chunk, and then bring the human back in the loop at the end, which is take the plan now that came out of your hazard assessment and put it into action.
Is this still true?
Use it in your
and
safety
is this still
kickoffs.
true?
Right? All those things. So it's just the
Yeah.
human's still there. They're doing the tasks. It's just flipping them. Let's get them out of that administrative chug and burden. Because again, admittedly, I'd see people spend hours building these beautiful plans. They get put in the project files and they'd never be touched.
Yeah.
And I'd go back and say, you built that for no one. Clients didn't want to see it. The OSHA didn't want to see it. Nobody wanted that plan, but you built it anyways. The people who needed to see it were your team members, the project members. And if it never got into their hands, then we wasted all of that energy for nothing.
Yeah. Now all it is a CYA when something happens to say,
Sure.
look, I had a plan.
I had a plan.
And
Nobody knew about it. Nobody was following it, but we had a plan.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the thing. Yeah. You may be covered legally, but professionally and morally, that's questionable if you haven't really, taken it to action. Well, this, Chris, has been a spectacular podcast. I am so grateful to you for joining me today. I hope you'll come back at some point. I've enjoyed this so very much, and I know our listeners will.
Grateful to have been here with you today, Michael. I think you've formed a great company. Pleasure to be on your podcast, and I would gladly come back in the future if you'd welcome me back.
Wonderful. Thank you, Chris.
That's it for today's episode of the Canary Report. If this conversation helped you reframe how you think about risk and safety, please do me a favor. Hit subscribe, leave a review, and share it with somebody who needs to hear it. We're building a new category of safety and risk leadership, one that's faster and smarter. Leaders who aren't just empowered by tech, but whose wisdom is accelerated by it. To learn more about how Yellowbird's cutting-edge platform is empowering leaders to solve workplace safety and risk challenges faster, smarter, and at scale, visit goyellowbird.com. Don't forget to subscribe to our Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Yellowbird pages to stay up to date. Until next time, lead with clarity, know first, and act fast.